these markets move. So if you're not in the communication, if you're not in that groove, you're not going to make it. It's critical. I see commodity pricing being weaker for some time. Yeah, I think there's going to be some pressures on agriculture. The consumer is unrealistic and isn't looking at science of food production either. At the time, I thought every farm's key to success was agronomy. And then years later, when I went to the trade side of the business, I thought every farm's key to success is marketing. And both are actually important.
There's things about it that you can't be taught. You have to experience, and you're going to go through highs and lows for 5 to 10 years before you really know your craft. Hi, I'm Trent Klarenbach, and today I'm speaking with David Nobbs, a longtime friend and founder and president of Harvest Grain Trading, specializing in specialty crops. Dave, how are you today?
Good, Trent. Thanks for asking me to do this. My favorite topic is me, so we'll see what we can learn here today.
Yeah, well, it's usually the topic we know the best, right? It's easy to talk about. So
you bet.
So the first thing I want to lead off with is, how many roommates did you have in university?
Oh, I think like 40. It was a long ordeal, 7 years, and plus some time in Calgary in the summer and Regina, and it might be 50. I thought about writing them down one time, but I've actually forgot some of the names even.
Yeah.
It was quite an ordeal. I mean, in 88, I graduated from high school. We met in the fall of 89.
Yeah.
And, at that time I was just, I wanted to farm. That's what I was set out to do. And so I went to the VOCAG at the U of S, kind of the same as my dad had done. And, by 91, when I graduated from that, the bottom had pretty much completely fallen out of agriculture. And my dad encouraged me to stay in university. I think he would have encouraged me to be a little more studious than I was, but encouraged me to stay there. And then I started working in the ag chem industry in the summers, and got a real interest in agronomy, and and that career kind of led me to where I am today.
Yeah, that's interesting. I did not have interest in farming until I became your roommate in university.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. It wasn't really on the cards for me, and for a variety of reasons, one of which was the bottom had fallen out, during that period of time. That was one of the reasons. And and then I got the bug, actually, that when I was rooming with you, and of course the different guys that came through that place, and our buddies, right? It was a hot topic. So yeah, that's the way it started. So yeah, you from prior to university, you grew up where?
So Lancer. I was born here in Saskatoon, and I was adopted by my parents, Laverne and Beth Nobbs, and moved out to Lancer at a young age, obviously, and really developed a love of agriculture. And we had a 2,000 acre farm, and we were seeding with diskers, and it was durum on summer fallow. And it was that way in 88 pretty much, when I left and went to university.
Yeah, 88 was a bad year.
Yeah, 88 was a horrible year. Financially, it didn't seem to matter because we were young.
Yeah.
But
no idea. Yeah.
No idea about the background, on the finances or anything. But, that was a very interesting time, because I think 88 really pushed us into chem fallow, which pushed us into direct seeding, which pushed us into longer rotations with special crops and legumes. And so there's a lot of real formative stuff in that time frame that came out of that 88 drought. So yeah, it was an interesting time.
Yeah, I was shielded from what was going on, on the finance side of things. I'd really had no idea, which I guess that's the role of the parents, right? And pretty hard to comprehend. But I tell this story, and even when I think back, it's hard to imagine it happened. But I remember, I think it was 88. It blew so bad in the newly seeded crop with the diskers by the yard, and I swear on a stack of Bibles that it blew down to the moisture.
Right.
Like I swear it did, and that's hard to imagine.
Yeah, I mean, diskers were a conservation piece of equipment in some sense, because you'd flip all the wet soil up and stop the erosion.
Yeah.
Basically. I mean, that was the role of a disker in a sense.
Yeah.
And I remember drifts in the ditches like snowbanks, and I mean, we still have those ridges, in parts of our farm that we fight with when cutting lentils or something. But no, that was an incredibly formative year, I think, in my life. And we had one crop. We were selling it to the Canadian Wheat Board.
Yeah.
And they were controlling our cash flows. And all of these are reasons why. And we had the American Farm Bill. So the American growers were subsidized. And on top of that, we had the Canadian Wheat Board restricting our ability to sell grain, right? So there was two major things there that had happened. And, it was a tough period. When I look back, I'm not sure how families made it. Right?
Yeah. A lot of resilience there that I think that resilience is being lost.
Right.
I don't think you and I, or maybe our generation, has it, and I don't think the one coming up has it.
Right.
They just haven't had those tough times yet.
Right. Yeah.
It's tough, but it's not.
Yeah.
That was, you put wet cloths around your windowsills and underneath the doors to keep the dust out of your house, right? Like it was crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that whole wheat board thing, right? I often said that Canadian Wheat Board was responsible for more farmers leaving agriculture than drought and grasshoppers combined.
Right. And I grew up in a very anti-Canadian Wheat Board house. My dad was the director of the Western Canadian Wheat Growers. And, when I came out in 96, that board out of college in 96, that Canadian Wheat Board was still in place for another 15 years.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, we had to find crops that allowed us to work around the board. And that's how I got so interested in canary seed production and trading and exports and really pushed me to where I am in my career today.
Yeah, that's interesting. You and I have had a lot of discussions about this, and, we had our influences. So around our house, we had the Western Producer, but we also had the Grain News that came every week.
Yeah.
And the Grain News, I really leaned towards that. My father, too, was against the wheat board monopoly. And we had some influences from Raymond Somerville to Reinhold Nunwaller down the road with Allstate Grain. And Morris Nunwaller, the conversations, anti-wheat board, the Cook family, anti-wheat board discussions were pretty prevalent also. Yeah. But yeah, so when you and I started farming, what, mid-90s?
96-ish, 95, 96.
I think that's when I started too. And I remember it being a struggle trying to find a crop that was going to show a profit and or cash flow.
Yeah. Yeah, and the internet was just, I managed to get through my entire college career, 7 years, without typing a single paper up. I didn't know how to use a computer. I remember I went to my first sales meeting as a chem rep in 96, and I actually checked my laptop bag. And I can still remember standing there with the sales manager and seeing my laptop bag come down the down the bag carriage thing in Winnipeg when we landed. Yeah. And I was not a computer guy. I didn't, you were an ag ector kind of numbers guy. And so you were more interested in using a computer, and I had no interest at all. But the internet had come along, and all of a sudden we were able to look at chemicals being used on chickpeas in Australia or, different crops. We both grew lentils. I started with Kabuli chickpeas, and I was working with Gustafson seed treatments and selling Vitavax, but we just had Apron registered right as I came out of college. And I'd worked with them in the summers, and Metalaxyl or Apron is required for Kabuli chickpea germination, right? So I got very heavily involved in custom seed treating and setting up applicators at all these little special crop facilities across the West. And I met Lloyd Affleck, who you had met at the time. And he got me really interested in production of chickpeas, which, was partly my job. But on our farm, he encouraged me to grow chickpeas. And then, we started, I remember, with 80 acres of Kabuli chickpeas, and we made I'm guessing, but maybe $400 an acre, which was just huge money at the time. And I thought, wow, this is super easy. And then I and we had to sort out the marketing. We were talking about the ounce testing and the way they
sizing, the 7 millimeters,
7 versus the imperial and metric sizing, and the counts, Spanish counts, do they call it? I can't even remember. Yeah. It's not really used anymore.
The screens were 56s or 60s or something versus the 7 mils or something.
I kind of forget a lot of it. And funny, I spent almost 25 years trading special crops, but chickpeas I've hardly ever traded. I've done very little experience in the chickpea market. It's more focused on lentils and canary, but that's all we lived to do back then, was trying to sort all these things out. And the Canadian industry didn't really know it either, because they hadn't marketed chickpeas either, right? And I remember looking at the apron numbers, my sales for apron, and I thought, you know what, I can calculate the actual acreage of this crop.
Oh yeah.
That was another thing that I've carried with me through my career, is finding those indicators of acreage and production and trying to understand where these markets are headed. So yeah, it was an interesting time.
I'll just circle around back to the chickpeas again. You introduced chickpeas and encouraged Chris and I to grow them also. So we grew them on our place. I think my brother and I grew 80 acres again. I think father grew 80 acres. I don't know how many, whatever Chris did, but we had the first year was a great crop.
Yeah.
And then what happened the second year?
The second year.
Got early frost.
That was the third year.
Third year?
So the second year.
I think I lost $100 an acre on them, but I doubled down.
Well, so in the second year, we did so good on the Kabuli chickpeas. My dad said, he kind of almost turned things over to me and said, okay, well, you see what you want to do here. And so I said, okay, we're going to grow Wero maple peas. Another formative moment of my career. We seed these Wero maple peas, and literally that was the earliest variety of maples that we were growing, that I know we were growing. And they would grow 6 feet tall and they'd lay down flat. The market was at $18 a bushel the year before. And I thought, I'm going to grow these in the south, and I'm going to harvest them early, and I'm going to get them to market before everybody else. Well, the market realized that there was a huge amount of expansion of acreage that year, and the price went to $4. And so we kept those maple peas for 2 years and sold them at $6, right? Wow. So, I think about that all the time, because that was something that I got in my head as a grower and didn't really understand that the market is always kind of anticipating, thinking ahead, and it's pretty hard to beat it.
Yeah, absolutely. Remember those green chickpeas? We went.
I think that was the next year, but
was it? Okay, see, this is my memory. I don't remember.
Yeah. So yeah, it
was years. I thought it was the second
50% frozen, and there was no pet food market in the U.S. to buy the frozen product. There was, it was just waste. It was hog food, right?
We had a foray into the color sorting business.
Yeah. We bought into a color sorting company. And that just kind of went nowhere, but
it was an experience. A lot of work on Lloyd's part. But.
And the color sorting, I've always found that, and I still see people look at their production this way, as they say, well, if only I could upgrade it. And you see people that had poor quality lentils last year, spent a bunch of time this winter trying to set up a color sorting system, but the market fell 20 cents a pound by the time they got their system set up, right? Yeah. Right. So, sometimes you're better off just taking your lumps and moving on, we had to invest in a system to learn that, I suppose. But
we were 6 months too late, probably.
Yeah. So managed to get out of that without losing a bunch of money by the grace of God. But,
it was a good experience. So.
Yeah. There's another one for the books, right? So
you brought it up earlier before we started taping here or filming, but so the internet came out. So Dave and I went to university. I didn't know what the internet was. My buddy Rick was in engineering. He had some friend who went to MIT, was sending these messages through the computer. I grew up on an Apple IIe. I was aware of some of this stuff going, but I didn't really understand any of it. In university, I just got, outside the Mac lab and the IBM lab, the Ag department, we didn't use them, right? But they're sending these messages. I didn't know what it was. And then got out of university and then, became aware of the internet.
Yeah.
And I remember spending $3,300 on a Dell computer.
I remember that computer, actually.
And that was a big old monitor on it. And it was a 486 or some it was a Pent. I forget what it was, but it was expensive. I've never spent that much on a computer since then. But,
yeah.
And then, and so Yeah, you brought it up, and the research we used to do into trying to find a crop to grow that was going to either cash flow or return a profit.
Yeah.
And the internet was slow, like 28.8K, and it was 56, that was lightning speed. When I just recently moved here a couple of years ago, my wife initiated a purge in my life. So I tend to collect things. I had these binders, number of 3-ring binders, 2 and 3 ring, 2 and 3 inch binders of just of data from different crops that I would painstakingly print off on a slow printer off the slow internet, trying to and document this, thinking I might need to learn how to grow cassava at some point because someone in North Dakota was doing that. Right?
Yeah, you thought that you maybe wouldn't find that website ever again, so you got to print it off, stick it in a binder, and yeah, I had this. I was doing the same things, yeah. And but we did hit on a few things. I mean, coriander became about a third of our production on our farm for 4 or 5 years.
Yeah,
and that really worked well.
Yeah.
And it was top 2 for profit every year I grew that crop.
Yeah.
I remember we had 100 bushel coriander crop in 2004. So this is 8 or so years after kind of coming out of college. And the neighbors were over helping us, and they filled the Super Bee full of this stuff, which is about 2,200 bushels. And then they went to a 1,600 bushel bin and started dumping it in the bin, and then bam, snap off the shear pin. Oh, yeah. Because the load wouldn't actually fit in the bin. And then they would go back to the field, fill it up again. It was coming off so fast.
Yeah. And
they'd do the same thing again. And they were like, these Super Bees hold more grain than our bin does, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, it took couple years to sell all that product, right? It was a small niche market.
Yeah. Yeah, it was only a few buyers. It was a main crop from myself. Also, it was consistently the one crop that would produce a profit.
Yeah.
And it was the only profit, and it was a fairly healthy profit.
Yeah.
But it had to offset everything else, right? But it was, stuff with bushel. That was a great experience, really.
Yeah. Yeah, no, coriander was a really interesting crop. I mean, once I went to CanPulse, after my Gustafson Chem days, we started marketing some of that to Mexico and Europe and different places. And yeah, it was a niche crop. And then we get into 07, 08, and the ethanol boom hits. And then kind of rising tide lifted all boats. And then a guy started to drop some of these really super niche things and focus on stuff that, just had better market opportunities, right? And that's where we dropped that crop. We also tried anise. Did you try that?
I got a bag from you, but I never ended up seeding it.
Right.
I didn't get my act in order that year.
Yeah, it came on the bus. I think I got bags of seed on the bus out of Manitoba. And we had a bin smelled like black licorice for a decade after, and we ended up burning that stuff. It was a 140-day to maturity crop, and it didn't fly. So there's some successes and failures along the way. So.
Yeah, but you got to try, right?
Yeah,
and that's what I was trying everything to the same as you. Just there's what can I grow here, and and.
Caraway and dill and
did you get into that stuff? Caraway and
dill? We didn't. But a neighbor did grow some dill, but we never did. The problem with some of these crops, and I see this even with, still in my career today, like black beluga lentils, right? Like, if I had 200 tons, and this happened to me a couple of years ago, I bought 200 tons and took me 8 months to sell the stuff, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And it's just so niche. And when you start moving, I'm really, in my current role, more of an export trader, and I'm not a food guy. And you have to be more of a food guy in some of these really super niche crops, right? And it's just not kind of who I am.
Well, yeah, you brought up the liquidity of the crops, and coriander was obviously a significant crop for both of us at one time, and a handful of buyers.
Yeah.
And
3.
Yeah.
3 in Canada, I think, at the time,
3
right?
in Canada.
Yeah.
Like I remember had all, I was undercapitalized and was totally undercapitalized. And I remember, had everything planned out to sell this stuff for spring, so I could have some money for seeding, right? And the buyer was gone to Cuba, right?
Right.
and it was panic time. He was great to deal with after that, but like there just wasn't any options.
Right.
So you really, those niche crops, if you need a little bit of room to be able to work with them, I think, because if you rely on them as a pivotal or important part of your business, it can be difficult. So. Yeah.
But I think, and I think so. I think that's one of the things we took home was from that period was you still have to have crops you can sell and market and turn into cash, right? Yeah. And so that that's where I dropped some of that kind of innovative stuff that we were doing, and shifted into some different crops that just have more demand and more volumes, and I couldn't even tell you how much coriander is produced anymore in the province. I was, very tuned into that at the time, but
I've seen very few crops in the last 15 years.
Yeah. There's nothing nicer than a flowering coriander field though, right?
I like it. It's beautiful. I love the smell of it.
It's a neat crop.
Neighbors didn't appreciate it as much as I did. But, that's the way it works. Yeah. So, okay. So you went to university, you and I graduated in mid-90s. I went back home, did transportation, eventually farming. What was your path after that?
Well, so I was farming and working for Gustafson's. So, and I got very kind of focused on special crop production, chickpeas, lentils, peas, and the seed treatments required for those crops, right? So became a bit of an expert on the application in that side of our business at Gustafson, and Gustafson went through a merger and a buyout, and I was severanced in 2002, but prior to that, I had started to get this love and interest in trade, right? And it's funny, at the time I thought every farm's key to success was agronomy, and then years later, when I went to the trade side of the business, I thought every farm's key to success is marketing, right? And both are actually important. And I've always considered myself an agronomist first, and it was probably 15 years that I was worked in the trade before I considered myself more of a trader than an agronomist. And Lloyd gave me that love and interest in the global markets for product. So we had the Crow benefit payout, or at the end of the Crow benefit, I honestly can't remember if there was a payout or not, but there was a lot of companies, a lot of groups of farmers. I think there was like 18 in Saskatchewan alone that all wanted to build processing facility. Right. So there was a group in Kindersley that was interested in putting up a splitting plant. So and I was still working at Gustafson, and again, more and more interested in the trade side. And so they'd asked me to come to a meeting. And, it was late 99, 2000, somewhere in there. And so this group wanted to build a red lentil splitting facility. Most people were focused on chickpea facilities because our acreage ramped from 100,000 acres, or not even 50,000 acres when I started my career in 96, all the way up to 1 million acres by 98-ish. I think 98 was about the peak, or maybe it was 1.2 million acres even. And, I was starting to get tired of the kind of corporate side of my life. And, I don't always fit real well with structure. And, I guess that's the entrepreneur in me. Yeah. And, I remember writing a few emails where, and looking back, I probably would have been a little less brash considering my experience level at the time. But, that company ended up getting taken over by Bayer. And, I was severanced out, but I'd started getting involved with this group in Kindersley, and we eventually became CanPulse. It was about 50 farmers. And, I was on the board, and I went to the first meeting, and I said, this is a great idea. Let's look at this. I really didn't know anything about red lentil splitting. I knew nothing, actually. And I was more interested in chickpeas. And, and I started to talk to them about it. And I said, let's look seriously at this, but let's look at building this facility in Saskatoon. And the reason was it was pickup and delivery, P&D. It was the cost of moving a container from a rural location into CN or CP container yards here in Saskatoon. And I think some people left the meeting thinking, no, we want to build this here. We want jobs for our community. And there's something to that, but there was an sound economical reason for building the splitting facility in Saskatoon. So eventually the group kind of agreed with me, and we bought land in the city. And then in 2001 we had a serious drought. 2001, 2002, and we weren't able to raise the capital required. We had a Turkish partner, splitting partner in Mersin, and he ended up in some legal issues. There's an entire episode on that whole saga, but we ended up going ahead and we bought a satellite location in Kindersley from AgPro, which was actually an all-state. You talk about Reinhold Nunweiler, and who was kind of one of the pioneers of canary seed production in Canada, and he had actually ownership at one time, and that asset sold in to Viterra under the AgPro banner, and we bought that facility for $200,000. $200,000, yeah. And I've seen some cheap locations, cheap asset sales, but that was the cheapest, obviously. And I showed up there, and everybody was kind of looking at me like, well, so let me back up. I happened to get severance out of the business, and at Gustafson, I wanted to end up in the trade, and so I ended up taking over the role of general manager of the company, right? And so in the first year we shipped, 7 or 8 or 10,000 tons of canary seed and lentils. And I thought we could never do more than that. A decade later, we shipped 95,000 tons through that facility, but we did a lot of projects. We did a lot of expansion and, built the company up.
So what'd you grow it from? 8,000?
From about 8,000 the first year to about 95 was our peak, or 96,000.
12x, eh?
Yeah.
Wow.
But there was a lot of red lentil production and in some of those years, and people shifted out of chickpeas into more reds, more green lentils. And then we had a canary seed cleaning line, which was, kind of a critical part of our company. And that was the first crop that I exported myself. We were a toll processor on the lentils, and we were shipping canary to our own buyers, around the world. And that was, 23 years ago or so, I started trading canary.
23 years, eh?
Yeah, it's a long time. I can't get over it. I mean, when I started, I was by far the youngest person in the industry.
Yeah.
And, now I am by far near the near the oldest in some of these crops, especially canary seeds, right? Like, it's just been, it's amazing how time flies, and turn around a couple times, another year goes by, and
yeah. So. Well, it's interesting that your canary seed story, and again, Reinhold's farm was 1.5 miles west of where I grew up.
Right.
1.5 miles east. And
did your dad unload the first bags of canary seed that came in?
That's the story, yeah. He's working for Reinhold. Reinhold had a trucking company at the time. And he asked, Steve, can you go and unload that bag? And the bags of canary seed in the back. I'm like, from the trunk of the car. And he had borrowed the car from one of the cooks to drive down. I thought it was Texas. And anyways, came back with his bags of canary seed, and what do you use canary seed for? You feed it to canaries, is what Reinhold. Right. That's the story, right? So
I often have people say, well, what's canary seed used for?
Yeah.
Well, to feed canaries, right?
Well, in stories, I'll have to get some guys on here to talk about this, but so they didn't know what to do with this, did not know how to combine it. So when the stories is when they first started combining it, they thrashed it, and they had all these black seeds.
Yeah, dehulled
seeds. They thought they did a hell of a job.
Yeah.
Right. And then, of course, the birds don't eat it, right?
Yeah.
And then, so they were out there, but prior to that, they had plastic jugs, and they had slits cut in them, and they're just trying to think how they're going to, I don't know. They're just again, little earlier than we were trying to figure out what to do.
Yeah.
Trying to roast chickpeas in my mom's kitchen, trying to figure out what do you do with these things, right?
Right.
They were out there trying to figure out this with canary seed.
Yeah. So, and even all that work was kind of done by the time we come along on canary seed, right? But yeah, canary seed has, very kind of, I mean, a little background on canary seed, and like I literally talk about this for hours, but as the Spaniards conquered Latin America, they brought this desire to have a canary seed in their home. So canary seed comes from the islands off the coast of Spain, right? So somehow that seed made it from Spain, probably into Mexico or southern U.S., and was being produced there for those birds in Mexico. And Mexico is still the largest demand sink for canary seed in the world. It's about 25% of our demand.
Really?
Yeah. So that makes sense that product was coming up from Texas.
Yeah, absolutely. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, red lentils splitting red lentil plant, canary seed plant.
Yeah, so we developed the plans to put the splitting asset in Saskatoon. We had a couple bad droughts. We decided to shelve the project and focus what equity we did have in the Kindersley facility. So I was there for about 15 years, I guess. And then we had a shareholder pass away. We had another one with an illness, and we decided, maybe it's time to wrap this company up, right? And find a buyer. And we ended up selling that company to Globeways in Toronto, and still a close friend and current partner named Rajesh Jain. And him and I had a Turkish partner in Dubai and another partner in Toronto named Tanvir. And so we went on to run that company, and I stayed there until about 2019. We bought the asset in Zealandia, which weirdly we now own again. And then we bought an asset in south of LaJord called Vigro. And so we ran those three facilities, handling canary seed and lentils and peas. And then I left in 19 and went to work for another company, and then they had some issues a year ago, and then moved on to this Harvest Grain Group. And we had bought a facility in Fillmore called Born Horse Seeds, and that's kind of what we operate under. We're in the process of changing that, but and then we bought Zealandia and Fillmore. So kind of full circle back to doing what I was doing before.
Yeah,
so.
That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, and I still farm with my brother. I'm married here in Saskatoon. My wife Sherry and I have been, married for 5.5 years, and it's a busy life, but I wouldn't have it any other way, I guess.
Yeah, you're busy. I know that much.
Yeah, and some days I don't know how. I'm finally learning to say no when somebody says, I got this idea. And I'm kind of learning, right? So, and I remember seeing another person, and I won't mention his name, but he was super innovative and really looking for the next thing. And I'm thinking about growing canola next year, and I'm thinking, I don't know, I'm going to have to learn a bunch of stuff that I don't know today. And so, I'm getting less innovative, and, finally hired somebody to help with some of the agronomy on the farm, and, and realizing that at some point it's got to slow down a bit. Right?
I think it's probably a good idea. But you want to quit learning. Once you stop being curious, you get old, I believe.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I got lots of learning in my current work though. I mean, that's the one thing I love about the special crop industry is every day you get up, something may or may not have changed in the markets. Right. And there's, you talk about chickpeas, something that I have the least experience in. I mean, there's a new chickpea crop every couple months in the world, right? So things are constantly changing and evolving in that market. But even something like red lentils, like through much of my career, we only, Australia produced a small amount of product, and we had them as a competitor for 6 weeks in Christmas, January, and they were out, and now we've got red lentils coming out of Australia. We've, big tonnage, more tonnage than we produce. in Canada, and we've got Kazakhstan, and we got Russia and Ukraine, and all the war issues in Ukraine have really rocked markets at times, and weakened markets at times too. Like, it's a very interesting world.
Yeah, I bet it is.
Yeah, so there's no shortage of learning.
Yeah, there's always something, right?
Yeah.
A crisis somewhere, or rainfall somewhere. Or,
Yeah. No, it's something new every day. Tariffs, American tariffs, which, don't impact a lot of my business. It might affect the Durham market some, but, it's kind of a redistribution of product. But it is pushing some customers around the world towards Canada, which is positive, right? Yeah, there's a lot of things, a lot of balls in the air.
Yeah, I bet. Absolutely. Managing a startup. I give kudos to anybody who starts anything from scratch. Like it is so difficult at so many different levels.
Yeah.
So you've done that a few times, right? So you're doing one right now. But let's start with back at CanPulse days. What was you grew at 12.5 times. Sounds nothing but glory, but I mean.
Yeah, we had quite a hockey stick of growth there in the first decade at CanPulse. And, we started with I think it was a 5-car rail spot. And then we went to 10 cars and 15 and 25. And, we just, constantly trying to expand the operation. And, some years, we made money, and some years we broke even. It was, but business was more simple then. Right? We didn't have as many competitive influences. Today, the Canadian special crop trade is highly competitive, highly anticipatory, so to speak, meaning constantly anticipating where the market is moving, as opposed to in those earlier days, the market was more, here's the cost of the grower, here's the cost of processing, and here's the cost of our sale, right? It was a simpler industry. We had to find technology that would speed up our processes and do more with less people. And eventually we couldn't find enough people. And that's how I ended up moving to Saskatoon. We just needed more people in our office, right? Yeah. And Kindersley, it's no secret, it's a very difficult place to hire people. The oil industry is strong. And, so there was a lot of challenges. One of the key things for growth in that group was there's no other key item. The key item was we brought in 6 foreign workers, right? Yeah. And that kickstarted. That moved us from about 60,000 tons annually to 95,000 tons. Really, with it was foreign worker program. Purely foreign worker program, and a couple of those guys still work with us today, and that's that they were really, really required to move the business forward. And it's all about people. If the guy isn't dumping the truck or cleaning the grain or grading the grain or paying the grower or trading the grain, the business does nothing, right? So I guess most businesses are like this, but we're very required on, our requirement is strong staff, right? And which is a challenge. It doesn't feel like we have enough people still in this province, right? And it's a constant fight, to get staff.
So, without the foreign worker program, what would have happened? What would that business?
I don't think that business would have survived because it just couldn't grow. We just didn't have the ability to grow the business. Wow. And profits per ton were look at the grain industry, 2013, 2014, there was a lot of profit in the Canadian grain industry. Everybody put that into more infrastructure and more assets. And now we have a situation like Northwest Terminals who isn't even operating. Right. And grain companies' margins are extremely tight. Yeah. To the point where it's almost, that they're having difficulty staying alive, right? Yeah. So, and there's other examples in the Canadian industry. In 2005 or so, there was a number of those farm groups went into bankruptcy. Yeah. And, those facilities were torn down, sold off by piece by auction. And we haven't had that in the grain industry this time. the price of the asset gets smaller and smaller and smaller, but we haven't seen anything, dismantled. And the industry really needs some facilities to go away.
And what would be the catalyst for that, do you think? Outside of the profit margins, but like, is there anything that might foresee that happening? Or?
Well, the industry's changed too, and there's more shipments gone to bulk conventional. So, some of that business has moved to the line companies out of the, the smaller, more mom and pop type businesses like we run. So I don't know what changes it, but we definitely have too much capacity in the Canadian grain industry. Port, and in the port, the G3 group built a massive facility in Vancouver.
Yeah.
And so there is tons of export capacity now. And so we either need a bigger crop or we need less assets. So I'm not sure either is going to happen.
Wow. So, challenging the business. Running my own businesses, I always struggled with money going out at a faster pace than it came in. My people, my staff, my previous business needed to get paid.
Yeah.
They got paid, but I wouldn't get paid for 60, 90, sometimes 180 days, right?
Right.
How do you manage, that's got to, you guys are paying growers. I know you're paying growers quicker, faster than you get paid. How does?
Yeah, it's all about lines of credit and that's one of the things we've gone through with this new group is ramping up lines of credit. Banks don't give you more money than you need. You got to keep showing them that you need more.
Yeah.
Right. We have insured receivables. So EDC has a program that says, if this buyer defaults, you're paid this money, et cetera. And we had to utilize that with China, the Chinese tariffs. So that product got to China and they didn't accept the goods, right? So then it has to be moved to another destination. And then EDC kind of covers the spread between those, covers the losses, so to speak. So that's required and most grain companies in Canada have that insurance. And, so you use that against your ABL lines or asset-based lending lines and the bank gives you money based on those guarantees by the insurance. But cash flow is a constant problem.
Yeah.
And as we move to 50 and 60 cent lentils, the buyers in Mexico or in Peru or in Brazil or in, Turkey, they're also smaller business. They're not big multinational companies.
Right.
So instead of $500 a ton US delivered to their port, it's $1,000 a ton. So they're trying to ramp their lines up too. Everybody's trying to do the same thing, but there's just not enough capital in the industry when prices get to where they've gotten. That's a constant fight. It's